Hello and welcome back. Today, we got a big boy. we, this thing is a monster. Look at it. The Akai GX 1900. A reel-to-reel player with a built-in tape deck, or cassette deck. I knew I had to get this as soon as I saw this. I've never seen anything like this. I've never even heard of anything like this. I mean, it makes sense that they exist, but yeah, I've never seen or heard. And I got it for parts. It was like 20 bucks. They said it doesn't turn on. All right, so plug it in. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be turning on, but reel-to-reels, they need tape typically, and yeah, so does this one. So yeah, it actually does turn on. So we'll see if anything is actually wrong with this at all. Yeah, that runs just fine. Look at that. It's even got a vent in the back. So let's get some leads plugged into this. Let's see if we can test it. And it's set to the right hertz. That's always good. And yeah, look at that. It's got a big old metal fan right there on the other side of the grill where the motor is. So we'll feed some tape into this and see if it plays. See if it has some kind of issue with the amplification or something. Ooh, definitely crackly. That's not good. Pretty horribly crackly, actually. But yeah, we got music.
Ow.
Definitely need to address the crackliness of those volume knobs, but seems to be playing fine otherwise. The VU meter seemed a little funky. I don't know if that's because of the volume, so we'll have to address that later. So we know the reel-to-reel works. Let's see if the cassette part does. And nothing. Try it again. Nothing. It's just automatically stopping it. So that's maybe detecting that it's playing, and it's trying to eat the tape. So that's basically telling me that the spindle isn't moving to take up the tape, but the capstan is. And then another issue is the rewind seems to be really lethargic. You can see how slow it was moving there. I needed to help it out, actually. So we'll have to look into that as well. So not perfectly unbroken, but it does turn on, luckily. But yeah, we need to address the tape deck, the crackly volume, and then the rewind. And otherwise, it seems to be just fine. So we'll start taking it apart. Gotta love stuff from this era. It's built so stoutly. And this thing is almost a special version of that, because this is, I'm not joking. This thing is 40 pounds. I had to weigh it. I had to I had to put it on my scale because I'm like, there's no way. It's like, I'm not this weak and this is only 20 pounds or something. It's like, no, this is a really heavy reel-to-reel player. It's entirely made of metal, as we'll see. So a little tricky getting these knobs off. It needs a really thin screwdriver, and it was kind of awkward, but I did manage to get them off. And then these volume knobs, I'm glad I looked at them closely. They're actually a Phillips head, which I typically, you don't see that. It's always a Allen key to get knobs like this off, but yeah, not that one. And the wooden veneered box on this is just gorgeous. It's in really good condition. There's only like one spot on the lid that's missing some veneer, but otherwise it's great. It took me a while to find a bit that would fit well enough in this screw. I don't know if these are JIS fasteners or just kind of slightly worn out Phillips heads, but they're not tightly held in, so it really didn't matter that much. But only 4 screws, one in each corner to get this cover off. Yeah, we can see inside this thing now. It is entirely made of just bent metal plates and linkages. It's gorgeous. Now, but this one was not a Phillips head. This was an actual Allen key, but it refused to come out. I think in that case, the Allen key was too small, but even when you get the correct size one, it just spins in there. So it's held in incredibly tightly. And we get another angle on this. We can see it's actually broke. And I don't think I did that. I think it either happened when someone else was trying to take it apart, or when they put it in, they just wrenched on it that hard. Luckily, I had this little bit that fit just perfectly in this, and I could get a bit of an angle on it to get it to spin. And then, yep, got it moving there. But yeah, it's like just crumbling as it's coming out. But only had to twist it a little bit, and you can see the imprint it made on that. Someone just really wrenched that down. Yeah, that's a pretty messed up set screw. And that knob, by the way, is cast metal, because of course it is. So, trying to get this metal cover off the top now. So I thought I might have to take out this kind of border around the tape head area, but yeah, it was just spinning when I put those screws in, so they must be just a nut on the other side. So again, just very simple, just 4 screws, 1 on each corner, and this can get pulled off. And look at that. I love reel-to-reel players so much. They just mechanically are so cool. There's nothing like this anymore. All these mechanical linkages, moving wheels into different spots to change the speed and direction. It's so cool. And something that was kind of odd to me is all these belts are in actually really good condition, which is good, because I couldn't find a belt kit for this machine at all. I don't know if it's just a very rare reel-to-reel player. I feel like I can find belt kits for everything, but not this one. I can only find like a few mentions of it online, and we can see that screw is missing. So yeah, someone's been here before and lost that screw. But once you get a couple screws out from the case, it just slides out of this box. And those handholds I'm using, that's actually, I was curious what that was. It's for speakers. Apparently there was a version of this that they sold, I think this is the GX 1900D, and then just the 1900 had these 2 speakers, 1 on each side. It's kind of neat. And then the motor's also loose, which is not as neat. I don't know how that would happen if someone took this apart and didn't put it back together fully. I don't know why you'd only like half screw in the motor, unless they just over time got like that just from vibrations, which I guess it's not impossible. And that's a better look of those holes where the speakers would go. Very glad the speakers aren't in there, especially because those are great handholds. It would be even more awkward to hold and carry this thing without that, especially being constantly concerned I'm going to stab a delicate speaker. But now we're starting to see another aspect of why this is just such a cool design, because this entire thing is modular. So right now I'm screwing or unscrewing this power supply module, and I don't know if this is some kind of anti-tamper stuff, but yeah, it's just packed full of something in there. And there was a couple screws like that throughout the machine, so I don't know if they did that to, I don't know, discourage people from taking it apart, or just like it's almost like a warranty kind of thing. But only 4 screws, and with that last one out of the way, you can see that whole block is loose, and it just pops out. So that's the whole power supply for this machine, and it's got all these plugs on it, and just everything else plugs into it. So on the bottom is this, I think they called it in the manual like the amplification part of it. So this has all of the little pots on it for the calibration. It has the volume knobs. It has the source selector, whether you're listening to the reel-to-reel or the cassette. And this has all of the plugs on it too. But yeah, this just pops off from the bottom. Just 4 screws on the 2 on each side. And then same thing with this. This was the mechanical block. So 2 screws on each side. And once those are out, this whole thing just comes out. Now, this one's a little tricky because it has that belt in it, which I'm glad I realized that before I just tore it apart. But once you get the belt out of the way, it just pulls out again. And yeah, you can see, just amazing how modular this is. I don't know if for repairs, if you would send this in and they would just swap out entire sections of it. I imagine that's probably what would happen, but... And here we can see how the cassette works. So it has this long belt, and that pulley on the left just goes up to the main motor, and then it's just dripping off of that. And look at that. That might be the smallest tape counter I've ever seen. I didn't even notice it until I got it out of the machine. It's the size of my fingernail. So, and then this foam stuff just turns to powder. So this was behind the VU meters, just pressing it up against the case so it didn't rattle. And then the VU meters themselves, it looks like the paint's flaking or something right on the needle. I had thought about opening these and repainting them, but I figured I would just end up completely destroying them. So I just left it as is. You really can't tell unless you look really closely at those needles to see a few bits of that paint missing. But yeah, this foam stuff just flakes off like nothing. It's almost like the stuff that's inside of 8-tracks just turns to dust. All of the kind of all the foam from this time does. But cleaned up pretty well. It makes quite a mess though. Now we can start messing with the tape deck itself. Very dusty in there. There's definitely a consequence for having a fan inside of this thing, and that fan's an intake, I believe. So it's just sucking in all kinds of dust and stuff that settles on this. And this does not want to come out. They Loctited these in, so I decided to apply some heat. So I'm using that soldering iron to try to melt the Loctite. But it didn't really matter how long I held it on for. It just did not loosen it. So I had to break out the big guns here. I think the problem was there's just too much metal. That poor little soldering iron was just getting all of that heat sinked away. So using some much more aggressive direct heat with a little butane torch. And getting a screwdriver that fits a little better so I don't mar the head quite so badly. And it's still pretty well stuck. Now, at this point, I really didn't want to apply any more force via that screw head, so I just got some pliers to try to twist it. And that was definitely the right move, because it started to move when I did that. And then just take the rest of it out. I was impressed I didn't destroy that screw as much as I actually did. And one other screw on this had to be persuaded to get out as well. The other two were fine, so just some very permanent Loctite they used. But with that out of the way, we can start to get further into the actual cassette deck part of this. So I replaced the belt that was on this tape counter pulley, because that was actually pretty well worn out. It held its shape when you removed it, so you know it's been there a while. And then this pulley is driving that spindle, or at least one of the things that drive that spindle. So I took it out to look at how it is. It's actually fine. It's perfectly fine. It's still springy. It's not liquid like some of these belts turned out to be. So since the belts seem to be pretty well okay, my plan was to just take this thing apart, just clean everything that moves, and re-lubricate it. Because just something was holding it up. Something was making that spindle not want to spin. And then since that spindle wasn't spinning, it wasn't taking up any of the tape, and thus the capstan was just spitting the tape out. So these big pulleys I'm going to remove first to clean them up. Again, it's just incredible how well made this is. I mean, these big brass machined pulleys. And this one was pretty stuck. I had to twist it, and that got it to loosen up, and then it popped out on the other side. And we can see there's just these bronze bushings inside. That's they're using as the bearing. So just took them apart, cleaned them out pretty well, degreased them, and then I just got this really lightweight sewing machine oil, and I'm just using that as the oil. So I'm not being being pretty generous with it, just putting it everywhere, because any extra I can just wipe off. I'm not too concerned about getting elsewhere, as long as I don't get it inside the grooves of the pulley. But once that's back together, you can see it spins really nicely now. It just keeps spinning. So taking apart the little idler pulley, I guess this would be, just keeps tension on it. Has this horrible clip that's holding it down. I don't know what you'd call these clips. I don't think I've ever not broken one, but I think I lucked out here because this is a metal one. I only have ever seen these in plastic before, and they just instantly break anytime you try to remove them. But yeah, that one came out not too terribly, just had to pry it on it for a little bit. And just a disc of metal there. It looks pretty corroded, actually. I don't know if this was in a humid spot, but there's a few other examples of some corrosion on this. So same procedure as before, just cleaned it, re-oiled it. And this one didn't spin quite as nicely, but I'm sure it was better than before. But yeah, it went back together just fine too. So just put those back in their spots. And now I'm just going to take apart the rest of the cassette deck part. So I was pretty concerned about this when I started it, thinking I would never get it back together, but it's actually not that complicated. There's a lot of those clips and sliding surfaces, but luckily they're really big, so they're easy enough to remove, and they don't just go flying when you do take them out. So it was pretty straightforward to take this apart, really. Just lots of screws. I think it's interesting. It cut away there, but you can see that black tape counter thing. It's like a Hall effect sensor there. It's in the bottom right now. And it's like mangled up. I don't know what happened to it. I swear it wasn't me. I found it like that. But it seems to work fine. So I don't know if they got melted or something, but yeah, anyways, this is coming apart nice and easily. Massive flywheel for the cassette deck, very nice. And there's that belt that I had taken off previously. And these two pulleys are my main suspects, because this is what's driving that spindle, the take-up spindle. So I'm going to get these out and try to clean them. So as we get further into this, the E-clips are getting smaller, but I got that one out. And you can see it's pretty dirty in there, and it really does not want to spin. And then for the second one, this is the clutch part of it. So it has that small felt pad inside, so that depending on, I think, either the direction, it'll slip. So got that out of the way. Had to get that tape counter moved, actually, otherwise this couldn't get lifted. There's a good shot of the kind of mangled up Hall effect sensor thing. Now, once I got this apart, got it out, I couldn't really figure out how to take it further apart, so I just decided to clean them as a whole. And I know that there's that felt in there, but I figured it would dry out eventually. So just putting this in an ultrasonic cleaner, just some mildly soapy water. I ended up putting a ton of different stuff in there to clean it, and it did a pretty good job. But I'm going to take out these spindles and check if there's any old lubricant that's holding those up. So pretty simple. You just pop off this top cap. And we can see in the bottom here, it's definitely got some goopy old oil at the bottom. Or it almost looks like grease anymore, but yeah, definitely need to get that cleaned up. That could have been our main problem right there. So I got it all cleaned up. I did that to both spindles. And then just, yeah, reassembled them with some of that same really lightweight sewing machine oil. And then once those are back together, you can see it actually spins really nicely now. And while we're here cleaning stuff, take a look at the tape heads in here. And the tape heads look really good inside of the cassette deck. I don't think whoever owned this ever used the cassette function of the reel-to-reel player. Like, you can barely even see a polished line on that pinch roller. Normally it's pretty prominent. So now that those parts are all cleaned up, I can start reassembling this and re-lubricating it. For that big flywheel, I did put some lubricant on that top hatch there, just not directly on the spindle, but it's nice and lubricated. And I thought this would be harder to put back together, especially with that spring there. And that spring is what the kind of front door hatch thing is using, but it wasn't that bad. So just basically the exact same thing I did, but backwards. And here's the aspect of it that's the piano keys interact with. So this is what's making it play and fast forward and whatnot. And look at that. All that still works. I was pretty surprised, actually. It was the first try to put this back together. And I didn't really show this off when I took it off, but this is the receptacle for the tape where you slide it into, and just look how well made that is. I think it has 4 springs inside of it. But once that's all back together, I'm just going to slide it back into its spot. Because to test it, it needs to be in there because it's driven from that top motor, and you could kind of see the belt hanging there. So I got that belt attached to the pulley that we'd cleaned earlier, and then the rest of it I could just plug into it with it separated. So there's no audio plugged in, but I just had it play for a little while, and tape's fine. Yeah, it didn't eat the tape at all. And here we can see everything seems to be working fine. So that was fast forwarding, just playing, and yeah, the spindle's spinning fine. It's fast forwarding fine, rewinding fine. And that tiny little tape counter's working fine too. So just putting the VU meters back on. I'd originally removed them just to make it easier to clean the foam remnants off, but it probably wasn't that necessary. So next up, we have to fix that rewind part of it where it really got stuck. So I'm feeling this, and the slip on the clutch feels like it's really strong. So the right wheel is moving really freely, but yeah, the left one is not. So I wasn't really sure how to fix that, so I just decided I'll take it apart and see if I can clean it or if there's something I can adjust with it. So starting, just taking this back pulley off, and that pulley goes to the tape counter for the reel-to-reel, and you can see some corrosion on that E-clip, so yeah, it must have been somewhere humid. So I actually ended up fully taking this thing apart, but I didn't find anything that was suspect. There was basically no lubricant in it, which makes sense because there's not really moving parts inside of this. I mean, there are, but not to the point where I thought the lubricant was going to be bad. So I ended up just putting it back together, hoping it would be one of those cases where taking it apart fixes it. You can see, yeah, the felt looks fine there. But I actually think I figured out what the problem was, or at least I figured out a solution to the problem. So I got it all put back together, and once you put it back through the hole, there on that rear pulley, I think that the position of that rear pulley is what is determining how much kind of pinch there is on this. So I made it so that this wasn't pressed up as hard against that weird looking spring that you just saw. And that loosened it up quite a bit. So I think that was the issue. And it actually might be too loose now because, boy howdy, it really does rewind aggressively now. The tape just goes flying whenever it's done rewinding. But yeah, as long as I stop it before it gets too bad. So I figured I better take these wheels off as well and clean them, since I've been doing that for everything else. So some big E-clips, easy enough to remove. And same as normal, just gotta wipe them down with some rubber cleaner. This probably isn't that necessary, but it does definitely bring some life back into these wheels. They were doing fine before this, but I figured they'd be doing even better. So this just removes that first layer of the rubber. I'm wearing gloves because I don't know what it is. It's some nasty stuff. It smells just like the most solventy solvent you've ever smelled. So I've oiled them, put them back into their place, E-clipped them down, and then looking around, what else can I lubricate? Well, I see this idler, and yeah, that's just a sealed skateboard bearing for the tape idler there. So not much I can do there. And it seems to be working just fine. So I'm just gonna kind of wipe all that stuff down and then just put it back together. And yeah, you can see it spins just fine. So the heads on the reel-to-reel definitely got more use than the cassette. These are a lot nastier. And that could just be because they're more exposed, but they definitely seem to have more wear. Yeah, we can see on the right, there's some kind of something stuck to the right side of that. I don't know if that's from tape or what that's from. There's like a hardened chunk of it that popped off too. Yeah, I don't know what that is. But I got it cleaned off, and that, yeah, it's just, yeah, there's more of it on the this post as well. It must just be from tapes. I don't know. Got it cleaned off. Like I said, you can see a little bit of corrosion on the tape head itself, but it's not too bad. And then just last on our checklist was the crackly volume. So just spraying some deoxit, some contact cleaner into the potentiometers, and very easy to do it in these. They're very open potentiometers, and I did it to the source selectors on the bottom as well. So once that's done, just slide it into place. Now those levers have to be in the right spot because those are interacting with switches on the amplifier board. So I think those switches are the record linkages or whatever. So when you click the record thing, something will change on the amplifier. And then yeah, just get it all put back together, plugged in. So that's the signal plug for the cassette, and then the smaller one's the signal plug for the reel-to-reel up there. Super cool design. But we can now start working on the box. Not really much to do. I want to address these hinges. You can see there's just one screw in them. That's definitely, that can't be correct. There's no way that's how it came out of the factory, because the screw's just sticking out, and it's not countersunk, and there's just two holes there to something. Kind of weird. So just gonna remove those. I'm gonna put some bolts in that instead. And then on this side, these seem to be fine and original. So this is what the latches latch onto from the lid. And then I'm just using some general wood cleaner to wipe this down. Pretty dirty, not too filthy. This whole thing's wasn't that bad to begin with. So you can see some of that damage I was talking about in the bottom or middle left there on that corner of the box. That's basically the worst of the veneer damage. And in this case, I used a little more of an aggressive cleaner entirely just to help clean off that sticker. And then once I got that cleaned, I used this wood oil finish something. I don't know what it does, but it definitely smells nice. And then all of the hardware I did end up removing and just cleaning separately, give it a nice polish. So I'm putting the screw back in just temporarily to hold these, to hold this in place. And then here we can see the bolts I was talking about. I think these are M3 bolts. So these are just have these little nuts on the other side. I probably should have used some washers because those nuts were definitely digging into the wood, but it's actually held really nicely. So I can now clean the face plates. So the two parts of this, we got that bottom plastic black part and then the metal panel on the top. I really do like the look of this thing. I don't know what it is about it. Yeah, more of that foam. It's just everywhere, leaving its dusty trail. Yeah, I really like that 70s look. Just the metal, exposed brushed metal look in wood. So we're on the home stretch now. Just gotta put this back in its box. So I just feed the cable through that hole in the back, and then it just slides into place. And here you can see I had forgotten to put those aluminum accents back on the side, so I had to take this out and put those back on. But that wasn't too big a deal. And now for the VU meters, I just folded up and taped together some paper just to add a bit of a spring behind them, because I didn't have any good foam something to put behind them. So it definitely needs something back there, otherwise they kind of rattle. So that paper helps push it against this front panel and just holds them nicely in place. We're on the home stretch now. Just got to get the front panel installed and the knobs put on, and then it's done. I don't think I mentioned it, but I paid $20 for this thing, which is pretty astounding because I basically put no work into it to get it fixed. I mean, it took a bit of effort to get like the cassette working, but that wasn't necessary. So yeah, it just goes to show, definitely could find some gems out there. Especially this thing was just, this thing has to be rare, because like I said, I couldn't find a belt kit for it. I could find hardly any mentions of it. I don't think they were very popular. It is kind of a weird thing, a cassette to reel transfer machine, or reel to cassette transfer. So yeah, let me know if you've ever seen one of these or you remember these. They must not have lasted long at all. They must have only existed during the transition from reel to cassette, but that's just my guess. Otherwise, that's it. And as always, I thank you for watching, and have a nice day. Now, for those of you who have stuck around this long, you're probably wondering how the whole reel to cassette or cassette to reel transfer works. Because I know I was. Because I just can't imagine it was going to be good. This thing it doesn't have any noise reduction on it. And you're going from a tape medium to a tape medium. And it's also like, I'm pretty sure you can record a cassette at a higher speed because of this thing, because it just has a hard set speed switch, which will change the speed of the cassette. So I'm actually going to test that. I'm pretty sure I recorded my cassette at like an extra fast speed, the 7.5 inches, or I think this might be, yeah, 7.5 inches, I'm pretty sure. I don't know, maybe they gear it down or special, but I took that reel-to-reel recording that I used, that you would have just seen at the end of the video, and I transferred it to a cassette, and I wanted to see how it would sound. And it's pretty bad. It's really hissy. It's one of those things where I don't know if I just don't have this calibrated yet, or if it was basically never that good to begin with. I can't imagine it was that fantastic to begin with, because this is, I don't know, early 70s, which I guess they had pretty decent tape stuff there, but I'll show you what I mean by this. Nice rainstorm in the background. Yeah, it's pretty bad. It's really hissy and noisy. I don't know. Maybe I just don't have a good recording for the reel to reel, and that's what messed it up. But yeah, that cracked me up. But I'm gonna see if this is recorded at like a weirdly fast speed. So I'm gonna pop this in another machine. I'll be right back. All right. So let's see how this sounds. Again, I'm thinking because I recorded it with the high tape speed selected, I think it's gonna be playing it back slowly. Definitely hissy. Yeah, I can hear the hiss. It sounds lower pitch already. Yep. That's pretty funny. You can record, this machine will record at 7.5 inches per second on a cassette. Huh. Maybe 3 3/4, I'm not sure. An absolute lo-fi machine. Well, that answers that question. So, yeah, pretty weird, the reel to cassette, cassette to reel transfer. I don't even want to try the cassette to reel. I mean, it has to be just the worst. But, yeah, thanks for sticking around so long, and as always, I hope you have a nice day.